Welcome to this introductory lesson on the Gospel of Mark. This is a different way of presenting a Bible study for me, and I'm looking forward to it. I really am. It's been interesting this time of innovation of how do we get the Word of God out into the community. It won't replace having a Bible study at Holy Cross or in somebody's home and being face-to-face with people. That's always going to be there, but this is an interesting way of reaching people. So why the Gospel of Mark? I've already taught it a couple of times at Holy Cross. I have this love of Mark's Gospel, mainly because it's a gospel of action. It's a gospel where Jesus does a lot of stuff. Matthew, in comparison, has a lot of Jesus teaching, and which is wonderful. But I'm drawn toward the action that you find in Mark's gospel. When we go through this Bible study, we're going to let Mark's gospel stand on its own 2 feet. What I mean by that is the purpose of this Bible study is not to harmonize Matthew, Mark, and Luke and the bits of John that we can, but to let the uniqueness of Mark stand out. If God had wanted only one gospel, he would have inspired only one gospel writer. But instead, we know he inspired Matthew and Mark and Luke and John to give us the story of Jesus from 4 different perspectives. And even though there's stories that are similar in each one of them, each one of the gospel writers has their own unique characteristics. And so in this study, what I hope to do with you is, when I bring in Matthew or Luke into the study of Mark, it's going to be to show the distinctiveness of how Mark shares his story. But who is this guy, Mark? There's people out there that believe that Mark didn't write this gospel, and that's not where I'm coming from. I believe that this man by the name of Mark, John Mark, wrote this gospel. He was the nephew of Barnabas. And Barnabas, you may know from the book of Acts and his association with Paul, especially in his first missionary journey, who was an encourager. We know that Mark, probably a very young man, was a disciple of Jesus, a follower of Jesus, not one of the 12, but a follower of Jesus. In fact, we believe that it was probably Mark, in Mark's Gospel in chapter 14, where this young man runs away. I believe it's verses 51 and 52 of chapter 14 of Mark's Gospel. In the Garden of Gethsemane, a young man runs away after Jesus is arrested, and he runs away naked. And we believe that that's Mark. It doesn't list him as Mark, but probably a good thought that it was. We also know that Mark went with Paul and Barnabas on their first missionary journey, but got homesick and returned. And so when Barnabas and Paul are ready to leave on their second missionary journey, Paul and Barnabas fight over whether they should take John Mark with them on the second missionary journey, and it causes a division between them. So Barnabas takes his nephew, Mark, and goes off on a missionary trip, and Paul takes Silas, and they head off on the second missionary journey. But we know that Paul reconciled with Mark. You'll find that at the end of 2 Timothy, the last letter that Paul wrote before he was beheaded for his faith in Jesus Christ, that John Mark was with him. And so there was this reconciliation that took place between them. But important for us today to note is that according to 1 Peter 5:13, Peter considered John Mark, to be his son. So there was some mentoring that went on between Peter and John Mark. So why is that important? Well, you may not be aware of this, but a lot of people believe that Mark's gospel was actually Peter's gospel. In other words, Peter gave the stories to Mark to write. And so it's Peter's perspective as well. Now, so the early church fathers held to this. You don't find it in the Bible, but the early church fathers, soon after Jesus had died and risen, the church was established, communicated that the gospel was probably due to Peter. And so we get that kind of flavor. We'll talk more about that as we go through the gospel itself. Well, anyway, one of the major characteristics of Mark's gospel is the journey of Jesus. We'll see the journey of Jesus in 5 different sections, okay? The journey of Jesus in Galilee at the beginning of his ministry, the journey across the sea, back and forth across the sea. We will watch him journey to Jerusalem, and then 2 parts of their journey in Jerusalem for the last week of his life, and then the journey to the cross and to the empty tomb. So we're brought along on a journey. In Mark chapter 1, verse 1, we read the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. We'll talk more about that in our next video. But the question is for us on this journey, as we're on this road, as we're walking with Jesus, as we're crossing the boat with him, the question for us is, will we believe that he is the Son of God? You see, this aspect of unbelief and belief are critical in our understanding of Mark's gospel. And Mark really kind of presents it to a question to us readers, to us who listen to this gospel. Are we going to be believers, or are we going to say, nah, this can't be? That we're going to join the crowd of people in Mark's gospel who couldn't believe that it was Jesus? Well, let me explain how these Bible studies are going to work. First of all, these videos that I'm going to present are 10-minute videos. I have a timer next to me that you'll see me once in a while glance over at. I realize that the part of the study, important part of it, is my taking the text and trying to make it come alive for you. And I'll do that in a 10-minute video. But there's work for you to do. And there'll be a download, a PDF download of the Bible study for you to follow along. You can use this PDF Bible study as an individual study or as a group study, but there's going to be a lot of them. This is an in-depth Bible study. It's going to last for more than a year. I've divided out the Gospel of Mark into 64 more studies. 64, okay? That's quite a few. And yet I wanted to take it in bite-sized chunks. I wanted us to delve with it. The danger with that is we'll get stuck in the trees and forget the forest and the bigger picture. So I'll try to be mindful of that as we go through this study. And then also what I hope to produce for you once a month, at least during this time when we're sheltered in place and we're not getting out as much, even when things start to lighten up a bit, we're still probably not going to be gathering for a while. I want to do a Zoom meeting once a month where you can, my vision is that you'll be able to submit questions ahead of time for that month's study that you've had in your study, your group maybe had in that study, and then I'll go on a Zoom meeting for those who want to have those questions answered, and we'll talk about it for an hour or so about those questions, depending on how many questions you have for me. And it'd probably be kind of the stump the pastor type of questions that you might have. I may not be able to answer them, but then I will figure out a way that I can research it and get back to you on those questions. So this is the structure again, that there will be these 10-minute videos. They'll come out on Wednesdays, okay? Wednesdays is when I plan to have a 10-minute video along with this study guide to go along with it. Again, it's good for your own personal study as well as it is for group study. And just so you're aware, that will be on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper so that you can put it into a notebook and keep it as a journal. There'll be plenty of space for you to write in these studies to make it a little bit easier for you. And then we'll have these Zoom meetings as well. I'm looking forward to this journey with you. Like I said, I have a passion for Mark's Gospel, and I hope it's not just information for you, but it's life-changing, because we believe that the Word of God is active and sharper than any two-edged sword. And also we believe that it accomplishes the purposes for which it was instituted by God. So I look forward to this journey with you as we study Mark's Gospel.